We are leading with news of the aftermath of the U.S. ambassador's allegations that South Africa is supplying arms to Russia. The South African government has, of course, since said it will probe these allegations thoroughly and also institute an independent inquiry led by a judge. On that note, let's go to Washington now, where SABC News correspondent Nick Harper is standing by. Nick, good afternoon. Thank you for your time here with us. I mean, obviously, we've seen the markets and the rand-dollar exchange being impacted after the allegations by the U.S. ambassador to South Africa. The big question at this point is there empirical evidence or proof based on what the U.S. ambassador had echoed as we speak?
Well, that is the central point to all of these allegations. So far, the United States and the US ambassador have not put forward any evidence. And that's why we're seeing investigations and eyebrows being raised, not just in South Africa, but also here in Washington. Those comments that he made in Pretoria have really sparked a firestorm between the two countries. The State Department has spoken about it here in Washington over the course of the last 24 hours, defending the comments, but also making it clear that more work needs to be done. But there hasn't been any evidence presented so far, and I think really that is the problem for South Africa, but also for the United States, because these comments in themselves are, of course, very inflammatory. They create huge problems for the two allies. And it's really a question of what now comes next, because with the US ambassador saying this, something that the State Department said had already been mentioned at high levels between the two countries, raising of concerns about what the ship was doing. But without any concrete evidence, it creates a real diplomatic problem for Washington. It now needs to come up with the goods to back up what the US ambassador to the country said.
Absolutely. Some questions about whether the U.S. undermined the sovereignty of South Africa has also come to the fore. It's not the first time that a warning was issued with overstepping or bypassing the South African government, just in relation to the terror attack that was announced during Gay Pride last year. How would you weigh in on those sentiments?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, part of the problem here as well is that an allegation of this kind would normally come from a higher level, would perhaps come from the State Department or the White House rather than at an ambassadorial level. Now, the United States, I think we have to remember, has looked at South Africa and raised questions during the course of this conflict in Ukraine. The United States, of course, would have wanted South Africa to join with the Western alliance in condemning and placing sanctions in place against Russia. That is something that President Biden has been working hard to push allies and partners around the world to join at that level of condemnation. Of course, as we know, South Africa has maintained that position of neutrality, non-alignment. The United States, I think, has been frustrated by that. President Ramaphosa was here towards autumn time of last year, about 6-7 months ago in Washington, a meeting with President Biden. We know that during those discussions, the president was trying to push President Ramaphosa to join with the West in that condemnation, and that hasn't happened. And I think there is that growing level of frustration. The US has expressed concerns not just about this incident with the ship, but also about South Africa's decision to join Russia and China with those military exercises back in February, around the time of the one-year anniversary. But it's one thing to be frustrated. It's another, of course, to make allegations. And I think it is something of an issue that Washington is now trying to try and smooth the path between the two countries and not turn this into what is already a huge problem, and turn it into an even bigger problem that could create diplomatic issues and tensions between the two countries for months to come.
Nick, you spoke about where to from here in your earlier points, and I just wonder, on the back of the allegations, has the U.S. ambassador to South Africa strained diplomatic ties or relations with South Africa at this point? Where do we fare?
Well, it seems as if he has. I mean, it's always going to be the case that an ambassador for the United States, or really for any country, when they are in another country, it is their prerogative to represent their home country and if there are issues, to call them out. But I think it came as a surprise to both countries that these comments were made in such a public fashion, that they were not done in the way that they would normally done, in back-channel discussions between the two countries, rather than being aired very publicly as they have been. So the ambassador has created considerable tensions between the two countries, and that is something now that Washington is looking at, as well as investigating exactly what may or may not have happened with that ship when it was docked.
Nick Harper, let's leave that conversation there. Thank you for joining us. Again, SABC News correspondent Nick Harper, live from Washington.